Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We're going to teach people how to hire coordinators, Landis. We are performing a public service, not just for this KOTN audience, but for teams out there who need advice.
KOTN Consultants is back.
Yeah. I actually find it quite annoying when like hosts are like, when I'm in charge of college football, here's everything. I mean, it's like, you're never going to be in charge. So can we just have a conversation without you acting like, so we're not doing that. I mean, unless they want to pay us. Do you actually think that they could we do this as well as schools do? Could we actually open a consulting firm on making hires, helping them make hires?
Probably not. I think I think a lot of folks in media think they can, and we're probably among those people. But when it actually came down to it, I'm sure we'd be just as bad at it as they are.
Okay, I agree. We're going to run through some coordinator stuff. We're going to talk about some Big 12 schedule stuff. The Big 12 had its big schedule reveal on Tuesday morning at 11. I kind of watched it, but it was like also they just sent out the email at the same time. And I was like, oh, I don't need to watch this. And then I was kind of watching. I was like, well, these guys are not that interesting, so we don't need to. So did you watch it? Like, I get like trying to make it a show, but they didn't do a great job of it.
I didn't watch it. I did enjoy all the tweets though. Like from the different programs, which was like, it felt like Kansas State did it, and every other program was like, oh boy, we should do this.
Yeah.
So they kind of cobbled it together quickly.
Yeah, funny tweets are good. Yeah. So let's start. So we're going to get into, we have 4 categories of coordinator hires, and we're going to look at some past history and recent history. I actually do think, Landis, we're going to come to a conclusion a little bit on really what is the best way to go about some of this stuff. Do you think we have a conclusion in us? I have a conclusion in me.
I don't know that I do, to be honest. Like, they're like going through this stuff. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And then I found a counter argument to it. So it's like probably, but not as like concretely maybe as I hope to. I'm
a conclusive kind of guy. Yeah. You know, like I really want an answer. We had we always like, we have to figure out like what photo we're going to put on the cover of the show for YouTube and that kind of thing. So our photo is Brian Hartline and Nick Saban, and Suncard 19 is asking, is Nick Saban Ohio State's new defensive coordinator? That is not what we're implying by that photo. But the reason that I said, let's use a Nick Saban photo is because I do think there are some lessons from the way Nick Saban handled some of his coordinator hires that can be applied to other schools. Shouldn't we follow the greatest coach of all time and do what he did?
It's a fairly good example to follow, I think.
Yeah. So let's talk about some moves. So there's a couple of new things that happened. We did a coordinator show a little bit ago. Actually, Mike, let's run this graphic now. I used it before. 56 Northern coordinators, 28 teams, 2 coordinators each, 56 Northern coordinators. Last time we talked about this, we said there's 17 new coordinators, and 2 more things happened. So we are now at 19 new coordinators for this season. One of them is that Chip Kelly left Ohio State as the offensive coordinator. They haven't made that hire yet. And the other is that Brennan Carroll, the Washington offensive coordinator, left. They did make a hire there, but the end result is 19 new coordinators in 2025, Landis. Kind of a lot, I think, right? Kind of a lot.
I guess it feels like a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like,
I don't know if it actually is or not.
Yeah,
go back and look at past
I'm not going to do that. There's only so much homework I can do of like how many in 2017 our 28 Northern teams. What was their coordinator turnover like? But anyway, a couple other things that were open last time we discussed it have been filled, including Rob Smith at Rutgers, hired as the co-defensive coordinator. They also brought in Zach Sparber from James Madison as co-DC, but I think Rob Smith is going to call it. 3rd time with Schiano. He was the Rutgers defensive coordinator in 2012, 2020, and 2021. He went with Schiano to the Bucs and the NFL. So this is not, and this is what happens a lot. Schiano is a defense-first head coach, and he's falling back on the familiar and kind of a repeat hire here. It's maybe not the most exciting thing in the world, but I get it.
I mean, at this time of the year, I get it. Yeah. And it does feel like Greg Schiano, I don't know, more than, I don't want to say more than most, but quite frequently does tend to lean familiar. Like, even if it's guys that he hasn't worked directly with as he has with Rob Smith, like guys who are part of the same kind of family or like offshoots of his coaching tree too. Very much valuing, especially on the defensive side of the ball, scheme continuity. Like, it's his defense. He doesn't call it, but it's his defense, and he wants people who know that defense. So I get it.
I do get it, and I do think sometimes it can be maybe opposite of what you would think, but sometimes a veteran. This is a little bit like Pat Narduzzi, right? Like sometimes it's like if you're a veteran defensive head coach, you want familiarity on your side of the ball, and then if you're pushed to it, you're maybe willing to go with like, okay, we'll try this new guy at offensive coordinator. That like you almost feel that you have to take more risks on the opposite side. That I think can apply sometimes to this.
Yeah, I think I think that's right. Although I don't know how often Greg Schiano is taking risks with anything. If we want to use him as the specific example, I don't think he's stretching too far outside of his comfort zones on either side of the ball.
Well, I will say so. Like the one thing in his first staff when he came back to Rutgers in 2020. Rob Smith was the offensive coordinator. It's like Greg Schiano went back to Rutgers and went back to Rob Smith. And he hired Sean Gleason that year from Oklahoma State, who had Jersey roots as an offensive coordinator. Kind of like a young guy, and like it didn't exactly work great. He got fired a couple years later. So it's like I think sometimes it's like, well, I took a risk once and like whatever. So anyway, Rob Smith, we probably could have sniffed this out. If we wanted to like do 4 hours on when we did the previous show, who's Rutgers defensive coordinator going to be? You could have come up with Rob Smith, right?
Yeah, with some time, I think we probably would have landed on him rather quickly. Yeah.
All right. So Washington, we thought when we did the show before, it's like, hey, Brennan Carroll hasn't left yet. He did leave. So now he went to the Vegas Raiders. His dad, Pete Carroll, hired as the head coach there. He's going to be the offensive line coach because guess what? Chip Kelly is getting $6 million to be the play caller there. But Brennan Carroll wasn't the play caller at Washington. Jed Fish is the play caller at Washington as the head coach. Promote from within. QB coach Jimmy Doherty is elevated to this spot, but it's still Jed Fish. So this is one of those where we have to differentiate between how big a deal things are. When you're a coordinator without play calling, it's not as big a deal.
No, I don't think so. And in this particular situation, I probably am less concerned with who's calling the plays and more concerned with who is in charge of the development of Damon Williams.
Okay.
So if there's going to be some continuity there, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. So a move from within. It's not a shock that Carroll left. So like the whole NFL thing, Steve Belichick, defensive coordinator, Brennan Carroll, offensive coordinator last year, sons of Bill and Pete, went back to work for dad. I don't know. It's great.
Is it?
Does everybody? I mean, it's one of those. I mean, no, it can't. It's not our deal anymore, but sometimes I am surprised. I don't know. Family's important.
But like did Chip Kelly want Brennan Carroll to be his coach?
Yeah.
Like, or is like, hey, Chip, we're gonna pay you $6 million to call plays, but by the way, here's your quarterback's coach. It's my son.
I get it. I mean, and I guess people want to be around their grandpas and stuff. I don't know if they have kids. I don't even know if they do. How could I come on the show and not know if Brennan Carroll and Steve Belichick have kids? I'm not about making it personal. I don't like nepotism. And I think like automatically running back to work for your parent, like as fast as you possibly can, sometimes is a little odd to me. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. What did your dad do for a living? Did you want to go work with him?
He was in the Army. They wouldn't take me.
Yeah, my dad was a cop. They wouldn't take me either.
Aren't they so proud now? Oh my God. And my mom was a kindergarten teacher. They also wouldn't take me. Can you imagine this with kindergartners? Are you kidding me?
I can imagine it more than in the military, but still. Not.
What's right in between kindergarten teacher and military? Shout in the microphone?
Yeah.
Maryland, this hire matters. Maryland hired Pep Hamilton, who is a longtime offensive mind. NFL, college, has been around the block. Josh Gaddis had the play calling duties taken away in the middle of last year at Maryland. Mike Locksley took them over, but I don't think Mike Locksley wanted to keep them. So this is like not super splashy, but this is, I think, solid as heck. And we also could have sniffed this out because his kid's playing for Maryland. Hamilton's son Jackson is an incoming quarterback. It's like, oh, speaking of dad, hey, is anyone's dad an offensive coordinator? Could we get that? So I think I like this. I like this because again, like Mike Locksley, I don't think Mike Locksley's seat is flaming, but this is not a time for Mike Locksley to like go off the radar and try to get some guy who's never done it before. Like, I think we know what Pep Hamilton is. I think this is a good hire.
His seat's warm, but salvageable. So I think definitely salvageable as long as this was the right move. Did they say in the announcement whether or not Pep Hamilton is going to call plays, or is Mike?
I think he is.
Okay.
I think he is. But again, there's a little, I'm not reporting that. I think my understanding, I think he is. So, because again, Gaddis did it last year. Like, Loxley took it over like as an emergency. So I don't think it, and again, like, to hire somebody with the Pep Hamilton's experience, I don't even know that he'd take it if he wasn't going to call plays, right? So,
unless he just wants to hang out with his kid.
That's good. Man, family. Everybody loves family. Why does everyone love the family so much?
I actually have an announcement
wonderful.
We're on the subject. My 2-year-old is going to join us as a co-host, and there's nothing you can do about it.
He actually probably, it's like, really, it's going to be worse.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's such a different thing when your profession has no discernible skill set. Then it's like, I don't know. Could your 2-year-old do it? It's like, yes, my 2-year-old could do it. No offense to your son, I'm not sure he could call plays.
No, he doesn't know enough words for that yet. But someday,
yeah, but he could do this.
Yeah.
Last thing, Jim Knowles had his news conference at Penn State on Tuesday. And he said all the right things about Ohio State. He also, I thought it was interesting, was talking about the idea that Penn State has had this run of like good defenses, and we've covered that. Like, the last 3 years, they've had a top 10 defense, 2 with Manny Diaz and 1 with Tom Allen. They were pretty good in the last year of Brent Pry, too, that as guys move through, it's not, Jim Knowles is not going there to fix something. He's going there to continue / elevate something, but not fix. At Ohio State, he was coming there to fix it. But he was sort of saying, like, James Franklin, like, sets the defenses up for success. Of course, he's going to go in there and like kiss the head coach's butt. I mean, everybody does when they get hired by somebody for $3 million a year. But what did you think of that idea? Because again, a lot of conversations that people have around James Franklin are about what he's not. And sometimes it's like, like they had to bring Andy Kotelnicki to like level up the offense and take some chances, but they've been very good defensively. And is there something in place there with complementary football and how James Franklin thinks about the game that will give Jim Knowles a chance to succeed, just like Tom Allen and Manny Diaz and Brent Pry succeeded?
I think so. I do think there's truth in the idea that like James Franklin sort of like as an offensive leaning coach simultaneously values being very good on defense without like sticking his nose in it too much. But unless he has to, I guess you can say that it's like, well, maybe he just hasn't had to over the last couple of years because they've had really good defenses with good coordinators and a lot of very good defensive talent. If ever that went awry, like I'm sure James Franklin would step in to do something about it, not dissimilar from what Ryan Day did this past season at Ohio State with Jim Knowles. So I thought those comments were interesting, like juxtaposed to the some of the stuff that I think led to Jim Knowles leaving Ohio State in the first place, which appears to be him not being particularly happy with how Ryan Day involved himself with the defense midseason for Ohio State this past year.
So Jim Knowles said all the right things in the news conference, and Penn State got the same kind of Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles is one of those guys, Landis, when you meet him for the first time, you're kind of like, this guy. Like, he's not like every other. He's not just like a run-of-the-mill college football coach. So the first time, I'm sure everybody's been through it. I'm sure they went through it at Duke. I'm sure they went through it at Oklahoma State, at Ohio State, now Penn State, of like, this guy's kind of like a peculiar intellectual curmudgeon, and everybody loves it.
Everybody does love it. He also gets to really pepper in the Philadelphia stuff. Like when he was at Ohio State, he would drop a reference every now and then, and I'd be like, "Hey, you guys hear that? He talked about Philadelphia," and no one else is like, "We don't care. We're from Ohio." But he does it now, and like half the room's like, "Hey, I've been to that place. I'm from that place. I know what he's talking about." So that helps him there too.
Yeah. And he also did the thing, and he did it with the Ohio State media. He did it again at the Penn State media, where he's like, the media is so much smarter than it used to be. I mean, you folks really know what you're talking about now. And it's like, he thinks we're smart. That always works.
But then he said the same thing to the Penn State media, and then it feels empty now.
Oh, look at that. What about Northern schools? You're just taking a shot? Oh, you just mean it's not that the Penn State media is any different than Ohio State media. It's just he says it to anybody.
He says it to everybody. Yeah.
You thought, no, let's be truthful about this. You're an offensive line guru from Philly, the son of a Philly cop, and you thought you and Jim Knowles had kind of a thing working there. And now if he's nice to anyone else, it hurts your feelings.
That's true. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did we think of the story, though, for Brandon Marcello? That was like, it had to be somebody from the Jim Knowles camp.
Sure.
Explaining that he was frustrated that Ryan Day inserted himself more in the defensive game planning after the regular season Oregon loss. And it was sort of presented in the story of Jim Knowles is excited to get to Penn State and be able to do what he wants. It also worked. Like the defense got better and they won the national championship. And then it's like you have like whatever. You have the sources from your camp say the thing to the reporter. And then when you have the news conference, you're like, oh, you're magnanimous and everybody's friends. I don't know. I mean, I totally get it. But also, does anybody feel bad that maybe a coordinator, like the head coach, came in and was like, hey, man, we got to do some different stuff. And then that demand led to a national championship and better performance? I'm not like, what are we supposed to think of that?
Yeah, I don't know, because as you said, like they were immediately better after that conversation. And it also wasn't just the Oregon game. We came on here after Ohio State lost the Oregon game and laid out the pattern of Jim Knowles' defense not stopping anybody in the fourth quarter of Ohio State's big games. Like that was the tipping point. That wasn't the start of something. And then Ryan Day, whatever he did, got more involved in the defense, was better from that point. And there was another thing in the story too about like, well, Ryan Day was sticking his nose at the defensive meeting room while Chip Kelly was left to do whatever he wants on the offense. It's like, yeah, until he stunk too. And then Ryan Day got involved after the Michigan game way more than he was throughout the season. Like it goes both ways. So like, I don't think a head coach can like meddle. It's his program. So like whether or not that yields good results or bad results, it was worth of a conversation. It's worth a conversation. But like as a coordinator, you cannot be upset when your boss holds you accountable to do a better job.
Yes, and especially when it works, because again,
when it works. Yeah,
this because we've all heard meddling stories at times of like people of head coaches meddling, and then it doesn't work, and it's sort of like, man, I don't like what. Why would you hire this guy and pay him all this money, and he has this great reputation, and he's done it for all these years, and then not let him do what he's good at? Oh, you're meddling. So we've certainly, I think, had cases like that, but it's proofs in the pudding.
Mm-hmm.
So. This, though, to me goes back to a discussion, and that's not the discussion we're having today, but should head coaches be play callers? I think the idea that Ryan Day, whatever verb you want to use, meddled, inserted himself, became a bigger part of the discussion on the defensive side of the ball, and then it got better, and then back on the offensive side of the ball, it got better. To me, is all of like, this is why I shouldn't be play caller.
Yes.
Because you can go fix the problem of the week and not be like, well, I got to be in the offensive meeting room on Tuesday night for 4.5 hours breaking down practice film, because if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Again, like I was privileged enough to go in one time and be in an offensive meeting room when Ryan Day was the offensive play caller. He's in the meeting the whole time with the laser pointer, pointing at like, okay, this is the 14th snap of practice. What do we think of the way this guy blocked this up? And then when you're not the offensive play caller, like I assume Chip Kelly had the laser pointer this year. Jim Knowles had the laser pointer. And Ryan Day is ducking his head in rooms, meeting with players, dealing with NIL. And then but then he's in there more with Jim Knowles. Maybe he even said, give me the laser pointer, right? Maybe to Chip Kelly said, but you're not beholden to it. You're not bogged down by the everyday laser pointer. That's coaching, brother.
That is coaching. Yeah. It's like, I think that there were years of frustration clearly built up with Jim Knowles and not being able to totally do what he wanted to do, which is a conversation about the 4-man front and Larry Johnson and the Jack/Leo position that he used at Oklahoma State and Duke. What's interesting in all of that is that he's going to another program that has been historically a 4-down program. So I'm interested to see what kind of leeway he might have there to do some of that stuff. But he was at Ohio State for 3 years. There were points of contention throughout those 3 years. At the end, they got a national title, and I don't know why there has to be like sour grapes about that necessarily.
He both got what he wanted from each other. Yeah. It's not like he went to the South.
And then when you play on November 1st, you're going to try to put 60 points on him.
Like, I do think it's on the table that Jim Knowles maybe will run his total defense at Penn State with more three-man fronts, with more of this float position of a guy who can be really disruptive, and he might find ideal players at Penn State who can fill that role. And I think it's also possible that people be like, oh, it's that. Wow, that is really good. You know, you're right. Sure. That would have been great to see Ohio State on a more regular basis. This seems quite good. I think that's possible. But also, what happened at Ohio State in the end in 2024 was quite good. We called the Ohio State defense the best unit in the playoff. And so, congrats all around.
Sure.
What a
he was
great
hired.
story.
He was hired
Everyone's
to fix
happy.
the defense, and he fixed the defense, and they all got a
fixed
raise
the
because
defense.
of it. Yeah.
All right. He was hired as an opposite ball coordinator. Ryan Day is an offensive head coach. And after the 2020 season, when it was clear that Ohio State needed help, they did not think about promoting from within on the defensive side of the ball. They said, we got to go get somebody. And we're going to go get what everybody viewed as the best guy available after the way that Oklahoma State defense had played. You knew that big time teams could come in with more money and get that guy. Ohio State won the bidding war. He had no connection to Ohio State. And sometimes that's what you do, right? When you're hiring coordinators, especially when it's opposite side. Sometimes you just say, I'm not looking for familiarity. I'm not looking for connection. I'm not looking for fit. I'm looking for best man for the job. And especially if you're at a blue blood program with dough, money's not an object. That's what we're going to talk about. How to hire coordinators. And this is based partly off the fact that Ohio State has 2 coordinator openings right now as the national champions and how they should go about it. But again, I think we're going to get to a conclusion because we're going to think about it in 4 different ways. We're going to look at some history and some do's and don'ts of when you are a head coach, hiring somebody from within on your side of the ball, hiring an outside guy on your side of the ball, hiring somebody from within on the opposite side of the ball from your expertise, and hiring somebody from the outside on the opposite side of your expertise. But this is the main thing we're going to start with. This is spurred by, should Brian Hartline become Ohio State's offensive coordinator? This would be a hire from within on the same side of the ball as the head coach's expertise, Bill Landis. We split up the Power Four to try to find examples to help build this discussion. Because we don't want to make it feel like homework. I can't do it in the offseason. I don't think we can have a show where we just come on and say stuff. There's some say stuff shows. I don't want to be a say stuff show. Is that okay?
I don't want to. Yeah, I know. I don't want to be just let's turn the mics and the cameras on and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So we did some research on this. So we hope you are. We're going to provide some background stuff because you are a normal person who is actually pursuing important things in life and you don't have time to research this stuff. So we're doing it for you and then we present it to you. Same side coordinators from within. Can I give you some examples that I think have been pretty good examples of this in recent years? Okay.
Yep.
I did Big 12 and SEC. You did Big 10 and ACC, right? By the way, did I get that right?
That is correct. Yep.
I don't want to come on and you'd be like, no, I did SEC and Big 12 also. A place like Iowa State's been good about this, right? Matt Campbell. And again, there are some head coaches who I think their expertise is less defined as somebody like Ryan Day. Because sometimes they're head coaches. I'll go through. Like, let me ask you this. What is Deion Sanders' expert side of the ball?
Sunglasses.
And this is like a compliment, not a shot at somebody like Deion Sanders. Because he played defense, but he also played a little offense. He also played a little baseball.
Yeah.
But he was an offensive coordinator in high school when he got into coaching, but then he became a college head coach, like a high school head coach and a college head coach. And I don't think Deion Sanders is not as defined by his expertise on one side of the ball as somebody like Kirby Smart on defense or Ryan Day on offense. Is that fair?
I don't know. I probably would still say he's defined by defensive expertise. He's like one of the best cornerbacks ever. So,
yeah. Okay. But also sometimes corners are just like, I'm covering my guy out on an island. You guys do what you want to do in there. But he was an offensive coordinator. He also coordinated an offense in high school. So I don't know. Anyway, Matt Campbell at Iowa State, right? Iowa State did this. They promoted Nathan Shieldhouse a couple years ago, and he was like the offensive coordinator for 1 year, promoted from within, and he was so good the Rams stole him, and now he's the Jags OC like instantaneously, which is like, this is a reminder that Matt Campbell and Iowa State are really good at like developing guys. And then they went to Taylor Mauser, who did a good job on the offensive side of the ball this year, promoted from within. So it's like promote from within on your side of the ball. Chris Kleiman had Joe Klanderman, promoted him from within at Kansas State. Klanderman had followed him from North Dakota State. Initially, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State makes an outside hire at defensive coordinator with Scotty Hazelton. He's there 1 year, and Michigan State steals him away. And then he promotes from within, and Klanderman's been with him the whole time since then. So I also think sometimes the more established you get, sometimes you think early on, maybe I better not just bring my guys. Let me get some experts here. Mm-hmm. But then the second, third round of hires, maybe you lean into like, all right, I got this now. I'm going to promote my guys from within. I think that's worked. Kyle Whittingham, defensive head coach at Utah. Morgan Scalley, promoted from within as the DC, has been there forever, right? Lance Leipold, offensive head coach at Kansas. He had brought in, so like Andy Koltelnicki was his guy, left for Penn State. He went outside and got Jeff Grimes, but now Jeff Grimes moves around a lot. Jeff Grimes left Kansas after a year to go to Wisconsin, promoted from within. So Leipold's done both, but again, I think he's a developer of talent, so like that's very easy for him. Ryan Grubb, going back to Alabama, had been with Kalen DeBoer forever, was a huge part. Kalen DeBoer is an offensive guy. Ryan Grubb's a huge part of the success of Washington making the national title game. He goes to the NFL, doesn't work. Kalen DeBoer brings him back. So like, it's like, this is still like, this is a familiar hire. It's not exactly from within, but like Grubb was his guy all along. Mm-hmm. That like DeBoer's like, I'm an offensive mind, but I'm bringing that guy DeBoer. Like Grubb was with him since the South Dakota days to the Fresno State days for whatever. Josh Heupel had Alex Golesh at UCF and then brought him to Tennessee as a co-OC. So like he rose up and was so good, he got a head coaching job and then promoted from within. Because again, Heupel's expertise is offense. Joey Hazel's the quarterback's coach, promoted from within. And the biggest one, Nick Saban does not promote within very much. In his career at Alabama, had not promoted from within very much. He had Kevin Steele, his first year at Alabama. He hired Kevin Steele as a veteran defensive coordinator, had been an SEC coordinator before. He was there 1 year. And then Saban was like, I'm going to promote my guy from within to replace him in year 2. And it was somebody who had been with him at LSU and had been with him at the Dolphins, but had not been a play caller before. And it was Kirby Smart. And then Kirby Smart held down that job for like 8 years. And that's like, really, he has one other promotion from within. But that I think is an example of, it's not something Saban did unless it was like the optimum guy.
Special. Yeah.
Like I think Saban almost had a rule. And then Smart's the exception to the rule in a way that I think Brian Hartline maybe could be the exception to the rule for Ryan Day. What are other examples of same side of the ball promotions from within that you found?
Yeah, I don't know that I have one that's like as good of a comparison for Brian Hartline as the Kirby Smart one you just laid out. There were a couple. The best one that like having the ACC that I found, like the most successful version of it, was Dabo Swinney at Clemson after Chad Morris had left. Chad Morris, very good offensive coordinator. I think helped elevate Clemson as Clemson was sort of like climbing the ranks as a program in terms of relevancy nationally. And then he left, and Dabo promoted co-coordinators Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott. And with those two guys calling the offense, I suppose in tandem was probably the best way to put it. They won 2 national titles. Now they had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, which helps. But those were 2 guys who did not have previous play calling experience, were internal promotions who had been on staff. And together with Dabo, who's an offensive mind more than anything else. He's more similar to like Urban Meyer to me, right? Where it's like you're an offensive guy, but you're not maybe like Urban was, I guess, once considered an offensive guru. I don't think Dabo was ever considered an offensive guru. But that was his expertise. But he did promote from within, and those 2 guys found success. Now he also, after they left, promoted Brandon Streeter from within, and he stuck.
Oh yeah.
So I actually like going through a lot of things, like found like some mixed bags with results, like doing this. Like James Franklin, I think like has gone in about like a bunch of different ways, but like he had an internal promotion of Ricky Ronnie to run his offense for a couple of years. And I think Ricky Ronnie might have had like some mild play calling experience, but not extensive. and he was fine. But then when they had to replace him, it was like we're going outside again. Like it was like
Yeah.
the most success James Franklin has had offensively has been with outside hires. But he has tried the same side of the ball internal promotion thing, and like it worked okay. Same thing with like Kirk Ferentz. Kirk Ferentz. By the way, did you know this? Kirk Ferentz has been, maybe you didn't know this. He's been at Iowa for 26 seasons. He's had 2 defensive coordinators and 4 offensive coordinators.
And they've all been related to him.
No, only one of them has been related to him, and he was the bad one.
Yeah.
All of Kirk Ferentz's, so he had 4 OCs. 3 of them were outside hires who had extensive experience.
Greg Davis from Texas was a big one, right? That was like Greg Davis ran like the Vince Young offense at Texas and then wound up at Iowa after it went south there.
Yeah, so it was Ken O'Keefe was his first one, and he had Ken O'Keefe. 13, he had 13 seasons together. Yeah, then it was Greg Davis, and Greg Davis was there for 5 years. And then when Greg Davis left, they replaced him with Brian Ferentz, who was an internal promotion, had no play calling experience, and by the way, is Kirk Ferentz's son. And he wasn't good. And then they replaced him with another outside hire. So on the defensive side, like there's Fran Brown this year. Hired Elijah Robinson as like it's not like an internal promotion because it was his first year as a head coach, but it was like a guy that he knew to be like a first-time play caller on defense. With Fran Brown's expertise is on the defensive side of the ball too. Like and it's probably far too early to say whether or not that was a good decision, but I think they would say that their defense probably wasn't as good as they thought it would be this year. So there's a lot of that. I'm going through here, make sure I have like things highlighted in my notes, and I think I highlighted some of them the wrong color to correspond to the segments we're talking about. But the Clemson one was like the best
do you
example.
highlight on the computer? Or do you highlight
on
by
the
hand?
Computer? Yeah, on the computer.
Oh, you can do
I end up confusing myself quite a bit. I think, but by far the best example of this that I found was the Clemson example. Same side of the head coach's expertise, internal promotions who had little to no experience doing the job prior to getting elevated.
So I think this can really work. I am not a huge internal promotion guy, especially at the highest level. I actually think at the mid Power 5 level, I love the internal promotion because how else are you going to get great people, right? You're not going to win bidding wars for people. So you might have to develop your own guys and acknowledge that if you develop them really well, someone else is going to come steal them and throw money at them eventually. So I would think like at the Kansas level, like I get it. That's almost at the Iowa State level. It's almost imperative. It's one of the things I think coaches like Matt Campbell and Lance Leipold can do best is that we develop guys. And then maybe if you are like a great boss and have a personal relationship with them and don't let the personal relationship get in the way of performance. Listen, personal relationships at work can enhance performance or they can hinder performance. If you can develop a culture where it's like, I love this guy, but he's a coach that coaches me as a coach. He coaches me hard. He demands my best. He doesn't let me off easy just because our families are friends, right? All that kind of stuff. And then maybe like I'll stick around longer. I'm not leaving unless it's the perfect opportunity because I freaking love working for this guy. Oh, take that every time. I'm afraid to fire my friend. Torpedoes your program.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think same side expertise, promoting from within, I think it works best if the head coach is still kind of a doodler. And that's kind of the thing that like when you talk about maybe like Dabo and Urban Meyer and some guys, even maybe like Dion, that like really it's like what they do best is like leadership and culture and that kind of thing. Like Steve Sarkisian is still a doodler. Ryan Day is a doodler, right? I've been in Ryan Day's office and had him show me the napkins that he writes on because he's just always thinking about plays. Now, if you're going to be a cohesive culture head coach, you have to turn off your play part of your brain a little bit so you can turn up the leadership part of your brain. But if you're still a doodler and it's like, man, I'm going to hire this guy to do this because I believe in him and I know him, but also I can really help. That's the main thing. If you can really help, And the less you can help, the better. Kirby Smart can help defensive coaches at Georgia. But if he has to do it less, then great. He has time for everything else. He has times for special teams and leadership and having them do yoga and warm-ups, right? But if you need to lean in, you can. I think it can really work. Before this exercise, was still almost not completely anti-internal hire at the highest level of college football. But in this particular instance, I'm much more okay with it than I was before we did the research.
Yeah, I think that's where I landed too. And John, our guy John in the chat, mentioned one I forgot to mention was like Sharon Moore was an internal promotion to OC at Michigan. He was a tight ends coach, then he was co-OC with Josh Gaddis, and then he took over the play calling after Josh Gaddis left. And I don't know, I guess you would say Harbaugh probably by that point was more of the leadership culture guy than he was a doodler. Maybe he's always been more of that. So it's not entirely applicable to what you're saying, but another successful example of an internal promotion for sure. I do, to an extent, I do think that dynamic makes me more comfortable, right? You just don't want it. There comes a point, or there could come a point, I guess, where the head coach has to lean in too much to where it's like, well, what are we even doing here? You should have just made yourself the full-time play caller to begin with. But if you can, lend a hand, be slightly more involved in that, then maybe you believe is ideal, but with a longer term payoff in mind. I'm thinking about, like, it's for another conversation when we get to some of the categories, but like Kenny Dillingham was like the OC for Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn before he was ready to go out into the world to be a solo offensive coordinator. So like if you're doing it with that in mind, where like there's going to be a payoff here if I not do it in tandem, but am connected to this a little more than maybe I was previously, thinking that after a year of that, or maybe 2 years of that, this guy's going to be ready to fly on his own. And when he does, boy, is it going to be spectacular. I do think that's worthwhile and workable.
Yeah. And then when Kenny Dillingham left Oregon because he was so good as a play caller that he got the job at Arizona State, they went and got Will Stein, who was the UTSA play caller. Like they went outside for that. But I think this definitively can work. And as it applies to, I think to me, this has clarified. It's just so interesting to have the national champion with no coordinators, right? Like it's not completely unheard of. I mean, it's actually kind of normal. Hey, we won it all and people want our coaches. That's not a shock. But to be in this situation right now where Ohio State has not made a hire on either side of the ball, this exercise has helped clarify for me that I think I view the two things like quite differently. Same side versus opposite side. Did you already think that way, that maybe it would make more sense or be easier for Ohio State to promote from within for the offensive coordinator because of Ryan Day's expertise, but would maybe be more of a risk or more difficult to do on the defensive side of the ball to promote from within because that's not Ryan Day's expertise? Yes,
you can't. And there are guys actually that Ohio State could promote from within who have coordinator experience.
Yes.
But you can't, in my opinion, I don't think you can promote opposite side of the ball with no experience. That is really risky. I mean, you can do it, and I'm sure there are successful situations or examples of that, but it feels like an inherently risky proposition that I would want no part of if I were trying to make a hire.
Yeah. Which again is what happened, because it's like when Ryan Day, and we're just talking about Ohio State because they have these openings and because they're just a very good lens to view this discussion, but it applies to everybody. Like when Ryan Day started at Ohio State, his initial defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, who he had worked with the San Francisco 49ers, had not been a play caller before.
Correct.
But like that worked. And look at where Jeff Hafley turned 1 year as Ohio State's defensive coordinator into head coach of the Boston College Eagles into defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. Like that worked. And that was a guy without experience. But then when he went to hire Kerry Combs, who had not been a play caller before, that did not work. Even though Kerry Combs had been a great position coach.
And he had helped incubate Hafley a little bit with Greg Madison, who was a wildly experienced defensive play caller, who was also around when Kerry Combs was at Ohio State, but I think like perhaps a bit marginalized in what his role was in the defense by that point.
Yeah. So, okay. So is our final analysis of same side promotions from within is that they actually can make sense and there are a lot of examples of it working?
Yeah, I think so. Because even the ones like the most egregious example I have of it like not working was because Kirk Ferentz decided to hire his son. Right. So like that's not where we are
Yeah.
with Ohio State if Ryan Day chose to do that. Yeah.
Within the program, not within the womb.
Right. Right.
Did you make this person? Like, did you make that guy? I don't think we should. You made him.
He looks too much like you. Yeah.
Half. If we cut him out, he's half you. We already have you. We don't need half you. We have whole you. Let's get a different person. When we come back, little Big 12 schedule talk. I do want to tell people I think we're going to do the ultimate Northern schedule next week. We're going 2 days a week now on KOTN. We did it last year around this time. I think we had a lot of fun with it. And now that we have all the schedules in for the Big 10, the ACC, Notre Dame, and the Big 12, we can do it. But we do just want to touch on a couple things with the Big 12 schedule coming out. And then we'll get back to some other categories of coordinator hires, plus what you're watching, what you eat, and what you're thinking at the end of the show. I got a lot of yogurt questions, Landis. Get ready for that.
Can't wait.
Are you the person I should be asking yogurt questions? Is there some possible yogurt expertise on this show?
I mean, I like yogurt, but I don't consider myself an expert.
Okay, well, maybe you can become an expert in the next 40 minutes because I have a lot of questions. We'll do all that next on KOTN. Back on Kings of the North. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. Appreciate you guys being here. We're gonna call this inbounds, out of bounds, which is like inbounds is y'all have to get 1 foot in. I actually think the NFL should go to 1 foot. Do you think 2 feet's good for the NFL? 2 feet in?
No, I'm fine with 1 foot. It allows for more exciting plays, I think.
It's just another nod to the offense, but I do think you'd have more crazy catches.
Yeah.
Like more highlights,
Yeah.
So, and then there's so many reviews of like, was there a second pinky toe or not? It's like, just who cares about the second pinky toe?
I wouldn't mind reviewing those. Yeah. But don't you also appreciate when a college guy makes a crazy catch and also goes out of his way to get the second foot down?
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr. did that a lot.
Overkill. It's overkill a little bit, right? Yeah. So anyway,
we get it. You're good. Yeah.
We get it. You're good. We get it. You're going to play in the league. We don't need it right now. Single body part. I'd be getting my toenail in, and that's it. Like, this is all you need. Inbounds, out of bounds. Like, inbounds is you agree with it. Out of bounds is like you disagree with it. We're going to bring in producer Mike. We have a couple things, like the highlights of the Big 12 schedule, particularly as they relate to our Northern team. So Mike is going to run the show here, and then Landis and I. The idea, Mike, is for me and Bill to yell at each other. Is that right?
Yeah. You guys yell at each other if you guys disagree, which hopefully you do on some of them. But yeah, like Bill or Doug said, if you agree with the statement, it's obviously inbounds, and if you disagree, it is out of bounds. So first one, as we look at the Big 12 schedule, as Doug said, it was released yesterday. Kansas can beat Kansas State this year, and that is based off Kansas has lost 16 straight to Kansas State. So inbounds, out of bounds, Kansas can beat Kansas State this coming year.
So one thing about this, Landis, is both teams are coming off a bye for this game. It's on October 25th. I actually think like I'd love for them to like find a date for this to like really have it be. I don't know. Maybe this is it. Sunflower Showdown. I'm gonna say it's inbounds. Yeah. I think like this. I'm not saying like slam dunk, but I also am curious, like the Big 12 schedule, they kind of had some Friday, Saturday, either ors there. We covered the Pitt-Syracuse game last year, Landis, on a Thursday, and that was because Pitt and Syracuse both had buys the week before. I'm kind of interested in this being a Thursday game. Maybe they'll change that later, but like really give this
spotlight. Yeah.
a spotlight game. It's at Kansas in their new redone stadium. Also, that they didn't play in their own stadium this year. So like a big opportunity, but I do think this is nuts, Landis, that this is 16 games. I absolutely think Kansas can win this.
It blew my mind when we were previewing this game this past season that the streak was what it was. Sorry to disappoint Mike and not yell at you. I'm with you because I think like moving this game to the renovated on campus stadium for Kansas will matter. It'll be a pretty charged up environment. Both these teams I think are in similar spots, right? They both return very exciting quarterbacks. The biggest question for both of them is like, how does Kansas make up for the loss of Devin Neal, and how does Kansas State make up for the loss of DJ Giddens? And then like they'll figure the rest out. I think Kansas State is probably positioned to be a little bit better defensively, and the team going into the season that people are like more excited about when it comes to contention in the Big 12. But it seemed like Lance Leipold even this past season felt like they were pretty close to like kicking that door down finally. I think they lost by 2 right this past season. So I think it probably will happen this year on Kansas's home turf. So I'm in bounds.
I got to check the schedule. Wouldn't mind getting to this one. Also, just to finish this up, Mike, Farmageddon's in Ireland in August. That's the traditional last game of the year for Kansas State. Why isn't this the last game of the season?
Because it makes too much sense.
Yeah. Big 12.
Yeah.
I would have done that.
We have another question coming up soon about the schedule placement of a certain game, but we will get to that in a minute. Let's go to our second one here that deals with the West Virginia Mountaineers. The first half of the season will be make or break for West Virginia this year. Is that inbounds or out of bounds? And we are basing that off of West Virginia plays Pitt, Kansas, Utah, and BYU early this year. So is this first half make or break for West Virginia this year?
They play them in a row, right?
So they open with 6 straight games. They play the first 6 weeks before they have a bye. These are their last 4 of that 6.
Yeah.
Is Pitt, Kansas, Utah, BYU, 2 at home, 2 on the road.
And the road games are Kansas and BYU, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm out of bounds on make or break. Like, it's Rich Rod's first season. There's a lot of very important people wanted Rich Rodriguez to be the head coach there. I don't know that they'll be out on him in year 1 unless they lose the backyard brawl and then lose 3 straight. I guess they could be.
That's the question.
But it feels I think that it's and maybe the fact that it's like a retread hire would erase the otherwise probably necessary grace and benefit of the doubt that a first year head coach should probably get. But even with that, I'm slightly out of bounds on this one. I don't think they're going to be trying to run Rich Rod out of town in his first season, even if they lose a couple of these games here.
I don't know. I think I'm in bounds on this. I think it could be if they lose all of these, I think we could get to the bye, and the bye week discussion is like, I don't know, did they hire the wrong guy? Because there are, again, the retread such a loaded word. I like this hire, and I don't think this is, we've seen this a million times. I think USA Today even just like a story today about like the history of rehiring guys. I think this has much more of a chance to be like a Schiano Rutgers type success. But I think if they lose all 4, and by the way, they're probably going to be playing Nico Marchiol at quarterback. This is probably Eli Holstein, Jalen Daniels, Devin Dampier, Jake Retzloff as the opposing quarterbacks. That ain't easy. I wouldn't want to be in Morgantown for the bye week discussion on the local radio if they go in on a 4-game losing streak. And it's just, and then the second half of the season is much easier for them, I think. But it could be a rough start. I think it's inbounds that like Rich Rod's got to show something early.
And they do have the fan base has a guy on retainer who can fly a banner around the stadium when they want the coach fired. So that's good.
Yeah.
It's quite a luxury to have. But yeah, I mean, coming off this past year, they started 3-3 in their first 6 games with losses, obviously, at home to Penn State, on the road at Pitt, and at home against Iowa State. So, I mean, you look at 3 quality opponents that they lost to, and you have 4 quality opponents in a row in your first 6 games. So I think it is going to be very key for West Virginia. Let's go here. So here we talked about a game being at the wrong time. This is our question for this. The Holy War is being played at the wrong time this year between Utah and BYU. It is October 18th. Utah travels to Provo. Is this being played at the wrong time, inbounds or out of bounds?
I think it's inbounds that this is the wrong time. They haven't played in October since 1967. This has traditionally been, it was a November game, an end of the year game for much of its existence. And then it became a September game for a while. I don't the Big 12 didn't protect a ton of rivalries. I think they only protected 4. So I'm glad that this is one of the protected games, but I don't know why it's not the last game of the year. And I just like October 18th feels like a floater in the middle there. And I don't know what the purpose of it is, because I think that this should be a monster. Shouldn't this be a monster? Or if you're going to do something, like find a home for it.
No, I don't. I'm fine with. There's no historical precedent for it to be. It's been all over the place. Like there was a stretch where they played it in November a lot, but it's not like they've only ever played it in November and suddenly they're changing things. They played it in October, they played it in November, they played it in September, and now they're playing in October. I don't care. I just want the game to be played. That's really all I care about. I'm happy that the game is being played. And frankly, like I don't want every rivalry game the last weekend of the season, because I am one man with 2 eyeballs.
So I like the idea that the last weekend of the regular season is just hate. Now, respect, but just like it's everybody's.
Don't you want to be able to watch them?
So you think not only do you not mind it here, you think if it's perhaps purposeful, and maybe it's purposeful by the Big 12, because we don't want to fall prey to Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia, and Alabama, Auburn. We'd rather try to put it in a spot. But then I am in favor. So like Red River, you know when that is, right? And the Tennessee-Alabama game, the name of the rivalry is the weekend of the year that it's played. I would then be in favor of like creating a situation for it. Can we do that? Can we do like it's going to be
the
7th game of the year? I don't know. We already have a name for it. We don't have
Halloween weekend. Yeah, you can do it Halloween weekend.
I don't know. I don't want it to get lost. As much as you say, like, you think I
think it would get lost if you tried to lump it in with other rivalry games.
But I think there should be a plan. I think there should be more of a plan then. And maybe there is, and they haven't let us in on it. But okay. I mean, I get what you're. So if they decided, the Big 12 decides that like October's rivalry month. So like, for instance, this is BYU, Utah's October 18th, Kansas State's October 25th. If it's like a purposeful plan of like, we're going to take our best rivalry games and go like, you own this weekend, you own this weekend, you own this weekend, you own this weekend, then brand it better. They love branding at the Big 12. I want to know when this game's going to be. Is that wrong? Should fans know ahead of time? Like, oh, I don't care about the schedule release. I know BYU, Utah is always the 3rd Saturday in October. Kansas State is always the 4th Saturday in October. That's what I would be in favor of.
I mean, if they want to do that, fine. I don't think it takes away from it. I don't think it harms the game not doing that. And if like college basketball has feast week or whatever, the Big 12 can have hate month. If it just
I love it.
Just like own October and stack your rivalries there.
Call your mark. Hate month. Sports hate month. Not really. Yeah. No. Okay. You've solved it. Okay. With your disdain, with your act like this is even you're acting like this is even a topic. Why are we discussing this? And then you solve the problem by accident. Your big brain.
That's what I'm here for.
The Big 12 did settle it. They had both of these schools will play the Arizona schools the week prior. BYU will be at Arizona the week prior to this, and Utah will be hosting Arizona State. So maybe that was it. You play the Arizona schools, and then you play each other.
Yeah. It's Utah, Arizona hate week, and then we hate each other. Okay.
Yeah.
Love it.
We'll figure it out. All right. So let's go to another one is Arizona State and Iowa State. Inbounds, out of bounds. This game will be the biggest game of the Big 12 season. November 1st, it is Arizona State at Iowa State. And obviously, this is a rematch of the Big 12 championship game from this past year.
I don't think so. I'm not expecting.
You gotta say out of bounds. You gotta say out of bounds.
Sorry, out of bounds. I'm out of bounds. I don't think, especially by this time, by November 1st, we'll know. I don't think Iowa State's going to be much of a factor in the Big 12 race. I think Arizona State will be. I think they could be the best team in the Big 12.
You don't think Iowa State will be in the Big 12 race come November? I think they'll be out.
No, I don't think this is the biggest game of the season.
Okay. I would say out of bounds too. I think I agree with Landis, but is it? the pressure's going to be off Iowa State. Rocco Beck gives you a shot. Like they have a baseline there of what they do still. I don't know. Has the standard been raised at Iowa State? Or is this a little bit more historical? Like Iowa State has some peak years and they're still good, but it's not like we shouldn't be expecting another double-digit win season from Iowa State. Like that they are not necessarily a program that maintains that tier for 3-4 years in a row.
I don't think so. Like I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff. Like I think Matt Campbell's probably too good of a coach for Iowa State to suddenly bottom out. And I think they'll have a winning season and go play in the postseason. I just don't think they're going to be sitting there on November 1st like unbeaten, like they were this past season.
As there are, I think, a lot of quarterbacks in the Big 12 to like. Jalen Daniels of Kansas, and Avery Johnson at Kansas State, and Brennan Sorsby at Cincinnati. Are these the two best quarterbacks? Sam Levitt at Arizona State and Rocco Becht at Iowa State? Maybe. Jake Retzlaff at BYU, of course. Devin Dampier, a lot of people excited at Utah. Could be. Yeah. I know you love Sam Levitt. You love Sam Levitt.
I think Levitt's the best returning quarterback in the Big 12, I think. There are a lot of good ones. The guy at Baylor, who's the guy at Baylor who took over, played well last year. Steve
Johnson. Is that his name? No, I don't. They're in the South. I don't care.
Johnson. Yeah. Good quarterback league, but maybe these are the two best. You know?
Yeah.
Sawyer Robertson.
Thank you.
I was close. Yeah. That guy is too last name.
In the dark. Yeah. All right, so not the biggest game of the year. We are saying that is not the biggest game of the year. Okay, so let's go to our final one here, and it deals with Colorado posts Shedeur and Travis Hunter. Inbounds, out of bounds. Colorado having 7 home games is the craziest schedule stat of the year. This is their first time having 7 home games since 1982.
Pretty crazy. It's a lot of home games.
This blew my mind. Like seven is the norm for every power conference school. It's like you play, especially if you're playing a 9-game conference schedule, but if you're playing an 8 and so the 8 is 4-4, and then you play 3 home games and 1 road game. And the non-conference, if it's a 9-game conference schedule, you make sure like the year when you have 5 road games in conference, you're playing 3 home games that year. It feels like Colorado didn't know what it was. This is like proof that Colorado is a big-time program, that Deion Sanders has done this. They're going to have 7.
How did it happen to Colorado that they were playing 6 home games?
I don't know. Where are they playing? They're playing at Wyoming and Tulane. It's like, I don't know. I guess like they're just like they didn't know who they were. This is crazy to me that this is the first time since 82. And by the way, what year is it? It's 2025. 27, 28, and 30. They're going to have 7 home games. So now it's going to become the norm. If this is his legacy, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what everybody does. I couldn't believe it. And it was not like some hidden stat. They put it in the press release that the university released about the schedule. It's like, hey, we're acting like a Power 4 program for the first time in 45 years. This is bonkers. This is how you make money. Home games are worth $5 million or whatever it is. Like I can't land this. This is, of course, this is the craziest stat. This is so in bounds. Colorado doesn't know how to do football. Now they do.
Well, now they do. Yeah, now they do. No, yeah.
Thanks, Deion.
Yeah, thank you, Deion. Congrats on the extra home game gate that you're going to get from this. I remember that there was a time a couple of years ago where former Ohio State athletic director Gene Smith was complaining that they only had 7 games.
Yeah,
they wanted 8. Yeah, they had 8 a lot. When the Big 12 was playing only 8 conference games, it was 4-4. Like the Ohio State was getting 8 home games every year or most years.
And there was a couple of years like Ohio State had 6 a couple of years ago, and like they act like they went bankrupt.
Yeah. So Colorado's just been living in that world for 30 years. Yeah, welcome
to college football.
Welcome to college football.
Michigan had 8 home games this past year, and they actually had their first 5 in a row were at home. They didn't go on the road until they traveled to Washington on October 5th.
I mean, the bluest of the blue bloods, it's 7 guaranteed, maybe 8. If there's 6 once every 20 years, we have to threaten to shut down the program. And Colorado's just like, you can do that? I didn't know that was allowed. Now Deion told him it's allowed. Anyway, Yeah.
Well, let's see real quick. So let's run through their home schedule. You give me a quick win-loss. First, Georgia Tech.
Oh man.
I'm not
quickly.
prepared to do
There's
this.
7
I'm
games.
not
So
prepared to
are
do
we?
this.
I'm not prepared to do that.
But I mean, we don't even
We have
know.
Delaware. Delaware's on the home schedule.
Win.
Yeah,
Win.
that's good.
Win.
Well, I don't know. Watch out
Unless
for the
Joe
Hens.
Flacco's
Watch
coming back.
out for the Hens. We think Caden Salter will be pretty good at quarterback for Colorado, right? And they're bringing. I mean, they're
Yeah.
Robert. They didn't lose their coordinators like that. We'll probably talk about maybe Robert Livingston coming up here. Like they've got their stuff together. I'm super intrigued what Colorado does, but also this is the kind of thing that helps. We talk about travel so much. This helps. And it's not just like, oh, maybe you get an extra win because like you're playing a patsy at home, but it's also like, I think it's another time you guys aren't getting on a plane and having to do all that stuff. This matters, man.
It does matter. And I am fully with you in bounds on this being a crazy stat because that 30 years is a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. That's our first edition of Inbounds Out of Bounds.
Inbounds out of bounds. I'll sing the theme song.
Yeah, we'll come up with a
1
jingle.
foot inbounds is enough. You don't need to. All right, let's get back to coordinator stuff. Thanks, producer Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
So Mike thinks it's good if he hosts stuff because then I get to yell at Landis more. Is that the idea of this?
Yeah, we like for you two to butt heads a little bit more, give you guys both the analyst opinions. I'll be the moderator.
Yeah. Did I yell at you enough, Landis? I always worry that Landis is going to come punch me.
I don't feel yelled at.
You okay?
Yeah.
We started off mild. We'll increase it.
It's hard to yell about a schedule. I got plenty of other things to yell about.
Yeah.
But it's like, how dare they do this in September? Although I still did yell about it. All right, let's get back to coordinator stuff before we get into Whatcha. Opposite side coordinators from within. So what examples do you have of this? This again is, okay, it's not the head coach's expertise, and maybe we're promoting somebody who we know, but maybe they don't have a ton of experience doing this. I think this is significantly more fraught than promoting same side, but do we have examples of it working?
Yeah, not a lot actually. It is a little because I think like coaches agree with us. It's a little more rare, I think, to kind of go down this road. An example of it working, I do think is probably Brent Pry at Penn State, but even that's like he had some play calling experience. Like he was a position coach at Penn State when Bob Shoop left after James Franklin's second season, I think it was at Penn State. They promoted him from within, and he had a pretty good run there as defensive coordinator. But that was like kind of it in terms of like examples I found that like kind of worked. And even then I had to fudge it because it wasn't Pry was totally new to calling plays. He had called them prior to that. Can't remember where it was. Old Dominion, maybe.
Okay.
Another one that jumped out to me was Marcus Freeman.
Okay. Who's that guy?
Inherited Tommy Rees and kept him as OC when he first got the job at Notre Dame, and then Tommy Rees left to go be the offensive coordinator at Alabama. And then after a good amount of swinging and missing on offensive coordinator candidates, he promoted Jared Parker, who was their tight ends coach, who had previously held offensive coordinator positions, but had never been a play caller. So he was doing it for the first time at Notre Dame in the 2023 season and wasn't very good. In a very odd turn of events, like he wasn't very good at it and still got a head coaching job at Troy afterward. But then Marcus Freeman immediately went back to like, I'm not doing that again. And he went out and got Mike Denbrock. Who had
That's a great one.
Who had just coached the Heisman Trophy winner the year before. So, but like he very clearly did not want to take the swing of promoting from within on the opposite
They tried
side
to get Andy Ludwig from Utah forever.
Very famously. Yeah. And he wasn't, I think Parker was probably, to be fair, like at best, like the third option for Marcus Freeman to be the offensive coordinator when he got the job, and then it just wasn't very good. But I think luckily for Notre Dame, that only lasted for a year, and then Marcus Freeman got it back by hiring Mike Denbrock.
Okay, so that actually, and that would be like, it's an example that actually is like, don't do this. It's like an example of why not to do it. I don't
know. Did you come across examples that would back the decision to do it? Because I really didn't.
Not a ton. So like Chris Kleiman, again at Kansas State, they had Colin Klein, the former Kansas State quarterback, who they kind of developed and made the OC, and then he left to be the Texas A&M coordinator, and they promoted Connor Riley, the offensive line coach, to be the co-offensive coordinator this year, but they also brought in Matt Wells, who's a former head coach as the co-OC, but they said like in Chris Kleiman and doing it said like Connor Riley earned this shot. Like he's our guy. We love what he did as the offensive line coach. So I do think this is one of those, and again, if we want to apply it to Ohio State, because it's interesting for the national champs to have 2 coordinator jobs opening. They have Matt Guerrieri, who's on staff, had been kind of a Jim Knowles disciple when Jim Knowles left Duke. Matt Guerrieri took over play calling at Duke, also had been a coordinator at Indiana for a year. So he would have, it's not, he'd be like totally new at it, but that could be the one from within. But I do think there are some examples here. I think there's at least one more of if you are going to do this on the opposite side of the head coach, you still have to bring somebody who kind of knows what he's doing to be like the backboard, which is the example when Ryan Day hired Jeff Hafley, who had never called plays before as defensive coordinator. As you mentioned before, they brought in Greg Madison, who had been at Michigan, came to Ohio State, and like had his resume as long as both of our arms with what he had done. And so I still, if you're going to do it from within, I think you have to backstop it with maybe an outside hire of a guy kind of nearing the end of his career who's willing to come for the job and the paycheck, but not demand play calling, but who's done play calling before. I think that's almost a have to. You can't just leave an opposite side guy. You can't promote from within and then just leave him hanging if he's never done it.
Yeah, I have 2 other things that I think fit into this category, but I'm curious what you think. One is who I mentioned, like Kenny Dillingham, and it wasn't an internal promotion because it was Dan Lanning's first season as head coach at Oregon, and he hired Kenny Dillingham to be his offensive coordinator. And so he was like a new coordinator, not an internal hire, but he had been with Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn, as I said, and I think maybe at times like shared play calling duties, but those were 2 head coaches that had called plays or were calling plays while Kenny Dillingham was the OC. And like Dan Lanning gave Dillingham his like first shot to do it on his own. And he did it for a year and he got hired to be a head coach. And then the other one is in Iowa, where Phil Parker was not a coordinator before Kirk Ferentz made him Iowa's defensive coordinator. But he was the defensive backs coach for 13 years at Iowa.
Oh my gosh.
Before he became the defensive coordinator. Like that was when Phil Parker got promoted to replace Norm Parker, no relation. That was his first foray into defensive play calling. And he's been there ever since. And he's one of the best in the country at it. But 13 years is a heck of a time to be marinating in a defense before you take it over. So I don't know how much that one might be replicable with the way the coaches move these days.
Okay. Yeah. Now, a lot of stuff Iowa does, like for good and bad, is not replicable.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how Ferentz does it. And again, but like that, this is an example of like, you wish you could do this. Like the Phil Parker hire is one of the best coordinator hires of the last 25 years, right? The guy's a stud and has never left. Like loyal and elite, that's a hard combo. Because sometimes if you stick around, it's because like maybe nobody else wants you. And sometimes if you're elite, you're like, I love it here, but I'm sorry they're willing to triple my salary. Adios.
Right.
So that worked really well. A couple more examples. Aaron Roderick at BYU, I think kind of is this. He had done some like some pass game play calling, I think, at Utah, but again, Jeff Grimes is in here because Jeff Grimes moves all over the place. When he left BYU, Aaron Roderick was on staff. They promoted him to be the full-time offensive coordinator. Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, when he left, like Brian Kelly had worked with Mike Denbrock at Notre Dame and brought him in at LSU when he made that move. Then when Denbrock went back to Notre Dame this year, they went from having the second best offense in the country by the Fremeau Index, but also they had Jalen Daniels, Brian Thomas, and Malik Neighbors. So they lost those 3 guys, which is a big deal. But they promoted Joe Sloan, the quarterback's coach, who I guess had been an OC at Louisiana previously, but he's young at Louisiana Tech. He'd been the OC. And then he came to LSU as the quarterback's coach, promoted from within. Their offense went from 2nd to 16th, but also you lose the Heisman winner. And like Garrett Nussmeier was still good, but that was like Brian Kelly didn't just go try to get like, now interesting, defensively, he did in 2024. They paid $2.5 million to go get the best DC on the market when they got rid of their DC. But OC, they were willing to promote from within. So I do think sometimes there's a balance, Landis, that it can be which side of the ball the expertise is, but also sometimes it's like, well, if we do this on one coordinator, we're going to do the opposite on the other coordinator. Maybe we'll promote from within here, give an opportunity, be loyal, reward people, save some money. And then over here, we'll just go throw money at the best guy available. And I think sometimes it's a balancing act.
Yeah, that was there's an episode of The Office like toward the end when Kathy Bates was on there, and they're trying to find a new Michael Scott, and Gabe is on the panel, and then she replaces Gabe with who's Mindy Kaling's character's name, and she says she does it because like Gabe is tall and awkward, and Mindy Kaling's character is short and confident. She's doing an opposites thing. Yeah, it's like sometimes that's the science that you need.
Yeah, this is our tall, awkward defensive coordinator, and this is our short, confident off. I like the balance there. That's just good coaching. And then the other one, this was again like Kirby Smart at Georgia had an internal offensive coordinator, and like it kind of didn't work. And then it was like, all right, we're getting rid of that guy. And he went to the NFL. He hired Todd Monken, kind of out of nowhere. And Todd Monken was gangbusters, and they won 2 national titles. And then when Monken left to go to the Ravens, they promoted Mike Bobo from within. I certainly was circumspect about that. Now, Mike Bobo had also been the Georgia offensive coordinator under Mark Richt like 20 years earlier. So he has a super long resume. It's not an inexperienced internal hire, but they lost who I maybe would argue was the best offensive coordinator in college football at the time, and just took the guy down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
And their offense isn't as it's not. I was a little surprised that they did it, but
you can be tricked, I think, a little bit by experience and comfort. Like part of me wonders if that might be happening with Rob Smith at Rutgers too. It's like, yeah, I get it, you know it, he's done it, and he's done it here, but like, is this the best situation you could put yourself in? Yeah. All
right, so let's go to another example. This is opposite side coordinator, right? Opposite side experience. So if you're an offensive head coach, this is your defensive coordinator hire when you hire somebody from the outside who's like the best person for the job. And this seems like something that is a very good thing to do, right? Did you find examples of this?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm going to end up like repeating myself because we touched on a lot of them, but like Marcus Freeman hiring Mike Denbrock is certainly that, even though they've only had 1 year together. We'll see. Like Bill, I guess I shouldn't even use like first year coaches. I would say that James Franklin has done it multiple times on defense with Manny Diaz and Tom Allen, and now Jim Knowles. The Ryan Day example we gave earlier of Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison, and then also with Jim Knowles, I think applies here. I think like I was looking at like Miami. I think Mario Cristobal has done a decent job of it on the defensive side. He's an offensive line guy, but his coordinators have been Charlie Strong. He had Lance Guidry, who like was at least an outside experience hire who didn't quite work out and only lasted 2 years. Then he went out and like got Corey Heatherman this year from Minnesota, who I thought did a very nice job for the Gophers, and that was a big loss for them. So that was another one that jumped out to me. Pat Narduzzi at Pitt has more often than not leaned this way with mixed results. His first coordinator was Jim Chaney, outside experience guy, and left for Georgia after 1 season. Matt Canada was an outside experience guy. Sean Watson was an outside experience guy who wasn't very good. Same with Mark Whipple, kind of the same with Frank Cignetti Jr. And then less experience, but like outside with juice was Cade Bell, his most recent offensive hire. But like Pat Narduzzi, actually on both sides of the ball, he's always gone outside. Like he's never promoted from within for his coordinator spots on offense or defense, which I thought was interesting. And that might have been all the examples I had. I guess you could say like Wink Martindale for Sharon Moore, but that's a first year coach, and that's also scheme continuity at the very least. So there's some comfort there. Yeah, those were the prime examples I thought. But I am in agreement with you. This is probably the safest course of action.
Steve Sarkisian, when he took over at Texas for his DC, hired Pete Kwiatkowski from Washington. This turned out to be pretty good, right? So
they had worked together at Washington.
I think maybe, but he's on the Peterson tree. So
Boise State guy. Yeah.
Mike Elko, when he got to Texas A&M, stole Colin Klein from Kansas State. Mike Elko as a defensive-minded head coach. Josh Heupel, when he got to Tennessee, stole Tim Banks from Penn State, offensive-minded head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Banks had been a co-DC and had been a DC like a bunch of places besides Penn State. Joey McGuire, Texas Tech, defensive-minded head coach, hired Zach Kitley from Western Kentucky because he had like this highfalutin offense to run the offense. Did such a good job. He got a head coaching job, and he just hired the Texas State OC. So like he's just like hiring. Like I'm finding OC, finding opposite side guys a level lower. This I think is like you can promote from within on your side of the ball. Opposite side of the ball, either throw money at the best guy available, or hire a guy one level lower who will take the step up. And I think Joey McGuire at Texas Tech has done a good job of that. Venables did this when he got the Oklahoma job, bringing in Jeff Lebby, right, as an OC. But then, so Lebby left. They promoted Seth Luttrell this year. It didn't work. He got fired 7 games in, and now he hired Ben Arbuckle from Washington State, outside hire. So Brent Venables on the hot seat at Oklahoma is doing 2 things. One is he's taking defensive play calling back. So he did hire from within. He hired himself. What's the only thing worse than hiring your kid is hiring yourself, except that was actually, I get this. He might be on tilt a little bit, but I get it.
But they tried to get Jim Knowles. They tried to get Knowles and didn't get him.
They did.
And then like that didn't happen. It's like, I'll do it.
When they couldn't throw money, right, they solved it with this rather than take a risk. But then they hired Ben Arbuckle from Washington State, who was John Mateer's coordinator, and Mateer's coming to be the quarterback. But Arbuckle's been a hot name, right? And so like a younger, like level below, step up. Like this is what a big time head coach with some money in a tough spot does. Familiar your side of the ball, sometimes yourself. Roll the dice a little bit on the opposite side of the ball with a leveling up guy. And then I just want to talk about Saban here a little bit. Jason Beck from New Mexico this year is also this for Kyle Whittingham. Right? Go get basically in that area of the country, went and got the best guy available. Yep. Right? Jason Beck could have had a bunch of jobs. And Kyle Whittingham, after a horrible season where they fired the offensive coordinator in the middle of the year, it was like, oh, what do you think you should do? It's like, get the best guy I can. And by the way, if he's bringing his quarterback, that's great. Right?
Yeah.
So that's another
Oregon did that with Will Stein too.
Yeah. And Will Stein, right. To go get the UTSA. Offensive coordinator. All right. So Saban on the opposite side of the ball has often done this where you're bringing like a guy from a step up, but he's always hiring somebody with experience. He's not promoting from within. Major Applewhite from Rice, Jim McElwain from Fresno State, Doug Nussmeier from Washington, Lane Kiffin, Sark, Brian Daboll from the NFL. Mike Locksley was the only guy who was an internal hire on the offensive side of the ball, but Locksley had been a head coach and been an OC, and he did it for 1 year before he took the Maryland job. Sark again, Bill O'Brien, and then Tommy Rees from Notre Dame, and that actually like helped torpedo his last year because like that wasn't good enough. Saban was willing to do it with Kirby Smart, and it worked. But on offense, he was like, I'm not hiring anybody who hasn't done this before. Yeah. So I think like there is a lesson to be learned there, right?
Yeah, I think so. On the opposite side of the ball, yes. It's like I said earlier, it's like it's just too, not to say that it can't ever work, but it's far too risky of a proposition for me to bring somebody in who does not have a demonstrated ability to do the job at a high level on the opposite side of the coach's expertise.
And so this is probably the least important one, which is same side expertise, but you hire somebody from the outside with experience, which just means like you trust your, like, you know it, but then you actually are willing to like hire somebody who maybe doesn't, like maybe you want, and I actually think a decent example, like Urban Meyer, when he got to Ohio State, is an offensive guy, but hired Tom Herman from Iowa State. Yep. Because he wanted to go a little more up tempo. He wanted to do some things. He was like kind of looking for a specific skill set to supplement and complement Urban Meyer's offensive knowledge. And then the Tom Herman thing worked out really well. And they went up, ended up winning a national championship. Jay Hill as the BYU defensive coordinator for a defensive-minded head coach, and Kalani Sitake is a good example of this. Has been the head coach at Weber State, was the defensive play caller at Weber State, and has worked out really well. That's probably the best example I could find. Brian Kelly, again, defensive-minded at LSU, like kind of hired a guy he'd worked with previously, and then just went and got Blake Baker from Missouri for $2.5 million. So Anyway, what were some examples that you found here of like same side external experienced hire?
Well, the Urban one with Tom Herman for sure. I mean, Ryan Day with Chip Kelly this past season is another. James Franklin like started by bringing John Donovan with him from Vanderbilt, but then went like and got Joe Moorhead and was like kind of in the weeds a little bit, and then went out and got Andy Koltelnicki. So I think like the two best. He's done both. He's done internal. He's done external. Both have worked and not worked to varying degrees, but I think the two best ones he's made were outside experience hires. Joe Moorhead, who was taking a step up. I think he was the Fordham head coach before James Franklin hired him. And then Andy Koltelnicki, who was at the power level, but still taking a step up going to Penn State. I thought Marcus Freeman hiring Al Golden. Like Marcus Freeman could have coordinated the defense his first year at Notre Dame if he wanted to, but instead he went out and got a guy who wasn't like a super hot commodity at the time, whose star had like dimmed a little bit from being the head coach at Miami and Temple, but was still like a veteran, smart, organized defensive mind to come in and run that side of the ball for him. And then I think like you saw Sharon Moore in his first year as a head coach went the route of like promoting a guy from within who he thought might be able to do the job. And it was very apparent very quickly that he wasn't able to. So then he went out and got Chip Lindsey, who again is like not the splashiest hire, but is an established veteran play caller who's done it at a lot of places. And I think will just bring a floor to the position that was like a higher floor to the position that is necessary for Sharon Moore to take a step forward and the program to take a step forward. So those were the three that jumped out at me in what I was looking at.
Okay. So let me offer you this conclusion for our viewers and listeners as they are thinking about their own teams when a coordinator hire is coming up. And again, we're talking about like a third of the Northern coordinators turned over this year. So like this is a common thing. To me, the conclusion is opposite side of the ball from the head coach's expertise. Man, you really should try to find somebody who's done this before. If that is at all possible, that is a way to go. If you are a little bit more of a developmental program and you're doing a good job, I mean, a thing that could be really smart, I think, again, like Leipold's done this at times in other places, like he did it, right? The Kansas DC, who'd been with Leipold for a while, retired, and they promoted DK McDonald, who had been brought in and had the co-title this year. I think that can be a really smart way to do it. If like you have co, one who's the play caller, one who's not, and then like you're telling the guy who's second among co's, like when this guy leaves, it's gonna be you. Like if you can do that and you can establish that on either side of the ball, I think that is great program building. But that's not how everybody does it. So the bottom line to me is opposite side expertise. Man, you should at least be looking outside and trying and not just defaulting to the guy down the hall. Same side expertise, you probably have a better handle on your own staff because maybe you just spend some more time with them and maybe you just made even better hires to begin with because that's your expertise and you maybe might have a real handle on like, yeah, this guy hasn't done it yet, but he's a rising star. And you can get much more on board with a promotion from within. So I think that's maybe the lesson to me. I think we reached some conclusion on that. And that's how our viewers and listeners can approach this from now on. When your program has a coordinator hire to make, it really matters where the head coach's expertise is and whether it's same side or opposite side. And that should influence the hiring process and what you think of the hire.
Yeah, that's where I ended up too. I don't know that I've always thought about it those ways, but the Hartline thing with Ryan Day like really kind of crystallized it for me. Like it would just not that you should be 100% comfortable with it, but I think you should be, if you're an Ohio State fan, maybe a little more comfortable with it than you would be otherwise because of Ryan Day's expertise. But then I would apply that to any fan base, of our 28 Northern teams as they're trying to figure that out. Yeah,
and then so would you? The McArary situation is different because again he's internal, but he's done it before. If Ohio State winds up promoting from within on both here, then it's Brian Hartline calling plays offensively and McArary calling plays defensively, or somebody like Tim Walton who has also been a coordinator before and is an internal hire but also has experience. They're not new, but they are internal. Is it okay if Ohio State winds up from within on both sides, or would there be any red flags in your mind?
I think it's okay, but I also would need to know what they're putting around those guys.
Okay,
especially on the offensive side, because I think like if it's gonna be Hartline, then I would like a someone who's not a coordinator per se, but maybe has some experience doing it also in the room with them. I think Ohio State probably already has that on the defensive side with Tim Walton, and like Larry Johnson's been around forever too. So promoting like youthful energy, but buffering it some with like guys who have been around the block is like not a bad plan as long as you do both.
Yeah. Staff building's interesting. And also we could do a separate show on like pass game, run game. That's a little bit of it to me with Brian Hartline is like Ryan Day's a passing guy. Hartline's a passing guy. You've got to have a strong run game voice in that room. And again, whether that's a co-coordinator hire, doesn't mean Hartline's not calling the plays, but you've got to really like who's setting the tone for your run game philosophy and approach, right? I think that really matters, but they also have an offensive line coach hire to make, which is certainly right. That's where they're factoring that into this. Like those pieces are connected. Whoever's going to be the play caller offensively, and then whatever they hire for the quarterback spot, that's linked with the offensive line coach spot, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I don't know. It seems like maybe there's been a decision made there for Ohio State's offensive line coach. I don't know. The name Tyler Bowen is getting tossed around quite a bit. He's currently the offensive coordinator at Virginia Tech, and he hasn't coached the offensive line in like 6 years, but he was an offensive lineman. He's young. He's 35, I think. So like that's a guy with a run game lean for sure.
Yeah.
Even if he's not 55 years old, but yeah, that's the idea. Like balance out the passing game expertise with someone who knows a little more about the run game.
Yeah. And in the end, that's the whole thing with any of these dads is balance, is experience and youth, is familiarity and willing to get like the best man for the job who's just really good at it. And you don't really know anything about him other than the fact that he succeeded. If you don't have that balance in your staff, you're not going to make it. So, okay. That's it for football talk. If you're sick of my face and my voice, you can leave and know that we're not going to talk ball. We are going to talk about yogurt, though. We're going to do what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking next on Kings of the North. Doug and Bill back. Thanks for being here on KOTN. This used to be one of the great days of the college football calendar, Landis, the first Wednesday in February, National Signing Day. So we acknowledge that there's like a little bit of recruiting stuff going on today. Like we're not focusing on it because it is 1% of what it once was with the early signing period in December and with NIL and the transfer portal and everything else. But like there are obviously people who are in this audience who remember that. I actually really looked forward to that and thought it was cool when it was like, holy moly, here we go. Like, oh, it's the Monday and Tuesday. They're battling down to the wire for this guy. Yep. Oh, it's signing day. Are they going to get him or not? I understand why it changed, but I miss it a little bit.
I missed it a little bit too, because even like the December signing day doesn't quite feel that way, especially now because there's just so many other things happening at the same time.
Yeah.
It does tend to get lost a little bit. I actually didn't even realize until you just said it that it was signing day. The second signing day, just because nothing really ever happens on this day anymore.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it would just from like the coverage standpoint, it would be better if they weren't signing all their new players in the middle of the playoffs, but in the middle of conference championship week. But we understand why it happens, and there's more certainty involved for the players and the high school kids, and like that's what matters the most. So anyway, we're good. We found a show anyway. What are you watching?
So this is going to be like a bit of rehash, but I did want to bring it up because I think I mentioned before that I was like working my way through Designated Survivor on Netflix. I didn't know that like the first 2 seasons were an ABC show, and then the 3rd season Netflix picked it up, and it's like a shorter season. But it was so jarring, like not knowing that. And I wonder how often people might have this, because it's not that like I know like that show Manifest was like on TV, and then Netflix picked it up, and I know Netflix has done that with other shows. But like you watch a show for 2 seasons, and then you get to the 3rd season, and they're cursing, and there's butts in the show, and you're like, what happened? Like this wasn't on ABC. And I just found it like off-putting. Like I'm trying to finish it, but I almost don't want to now because I just feel like it's an entirely different show once Netflix took it over.
It is one of those things. We don't swear on this show, and we don't show our butts on this show.
We don't, not yet. No.
And I
Maybe
don't. I mean, I don't think the show suffers for it. That there are times it's like it would be hard to do The Sopranos on CBS. This freaking guy, darn it. You know, but there are other times where it's like, I didn't miss the swearing, and I'm sure they swear in the White House, but I didn't miss the swearing on Designated Survivor the first 2 seasons. But then it is quite a thing. It feels forced when they start doing it.
Yeah, and it's not like I don't like. It's not like I'm opposed to it. I certainly use salty language in my everyday life. It's just like distracting and it feels forced. And I just like I've watched the first 2 episodes of the 3rd season and I'd like to finish it, but like I am now like really having to force myself to do it because I just don't like what I'm watching.
Anthony Edwards is in this season now, right?
Anthony Edwards isn't. Yeah.
And they changed the cast a little bit, which you understand. I think you might see, if you haven't yet, I think you might see Anthony Edwards' butt.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So hang in for that at least.
Okay.
Hang in for that.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, but they did a reasonable amount of like casting overhaul too that really makes it feel like a different show in a lot of ways.
And like Kiefer Sutherland's got a new haircut and he's like acting different. It's like you could have just ended it after 2 seasons. There's no way the show was so popular that like Netflix had to make a 3rd season. They could have just ended it after the 2nd season, but now they're forcing everybody to watch a 3rd season of bad television to finish the story.
But I'm sure that's in the meeting room. It's like, hey, listen, we're going to pick this up, but we're a little worried that like the show's getting a little stale and people are going to be like, why did you pick this up? And then somebody said, what about F-bombs and butts? And they were like, yes.
Mike, producer Mike asked in the comments of our show here if we meant Anthony Edwards, the basketball player. It's like, no, we meant
this is such a
he's Goose from Top Gun and he was on ER forever.
That's a great, like that's a litmus test. That's a generational test. When we say Anthony Edwards, what do we think of? Do you think Goose or do you think USA Basketball?
Yeah.
I will say I am awful with like actors and actresses' real names. Like they could be very famous, and I'm like, I don't know, but you could say their character name. I'm like, oh yeah, I know them.
So did you know that Anthony Edwards was the name of an actor?
No.
Do you know who Goose from Top Gun is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Don't spoil it with them. Yeah. Oh yeah. They sing that rock and roll song. Okay, so I am searching a little bit for some shows because we finished some stuff, and my wife and I tried both The Night Agent on Netflix and Prime Target on Apple the other night, and we got like 20 minutes in.
Don't spoil. So I watched the first season of Night Agent, but I haven't watched the 2nd season yet. So don't spoil the 2nd season of Night Agent for me.
We started we got 20 minutes into the pilot, and we weren't sure about it. We were kind of giving up.
Yeah, it's bad.
Does it get better?
The acting's awful.
Then why did you watch the whole?
Might as well. That guy, whoever that actor is, it might as well be a refrigerator box with abs.
Yeah,
he's a bad actor.
He reminds me of Woody from Toy Story, but not like the Tom Hanks part. The part where he's like laying on the floor because people came in the room. Looks like he's made of wood.
Yeah, he's quite bad.
Okay, and then there was one of those. Yeah, and the pilot, there's like something happens where like, not to give much away, but like people are killed, and then like the person involved with that just keeps going like, what's happening? What's going on? Why is this happening? And my wife and I were just screaming at that character like, what is wrong with you? What don't you comprehend? Get out of the house, you idiot. So
I could not believe that it got picked up for a 2nd season.
But why? But so you thought, do you do this sometimes? You think to yourself, my God, this show is bad. Next episode, please.
Yep.
Really? in the hope and pursuit of it getting better?
No,
or just torture yourself.
Just to like see where are they going with this? Where did all these bad writers and bad actors decide that this show should go?
Okay. And then Prime Target on Apple is like a guy who was on White Lotus, who I guess is famous now and handsome. But it's also super boring, and it feels like there's like an explosion that happens very early on, and then they'd shift locations, and we're pretty sure this main actor, famous guy, is going to wind up where the explosion is, but it's like 45 minutes into the pilot, and he's not there yet. And it's like, okay, I guess we're never going to see you get there because you've bored us to death. Here's the thing, though. We really like the political spy intrigue, international kind of things. And like we love like The Diplomat, and we love The Americans. Maybe we just love Kerry Russell, but like I mean, everyone knows those shows like that. And so now we're searching for that type of show, like political thriller kind of thing. And it's just like, oh, some of them are bad.
Yeah, you can watch Designated Survivor again. Let me get back into that one. Have you watched American Primeval yet on Netflix?
No, what's that?
It's like a Western. It's supposed to be like pretty brutal, like I think like violent, but it's about like navigating the treacherous Western American landscape in the 1800s, and I just think like a lot of people get killed in pretty gruesome ways.
It is very good. I watched that on our travels down to Atlanta. It is very good.
American
only like
Primeval.
6 episodes. It's like a limited series, so it's only like 6 episodes.
It's Peter Berg who's good at like making stuff.
Oh yeah. Okay. And Mike says I should watch Severance. I do watch Severance. So I thought I've only watched the first episode of season 2, and I thought it was a little slow. But then I think I've been told, my daughter told me the second and third episodes get better. So, okay. What are you eating, Landis?
So we went to we have a 2-year-old, and the ability to like go out and just like have dinner as a couple is limited, but we were able to do that last weekend. We went to a place called Cobra in Columbus, and I wanted to talk, like, we had these pizza dumplings. They were like fried dumplings that were really good. They were just like, it was like stuff with like cheese and sauce and pepperoni. And then I was like thinking more about it, and I was just like, they're just Totino's pizza rolls.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like they were good, and I would go eat them again, but it was like, oh, they're fried pizza dumplings, and it had this like very elaborate description of all the ingredients in it, and all it was like an elevated Totino's pizza roll.
Yeah. We had an app at dinner last night in a restaurant that we thought was really good, but we were also like had a similar experience. There is more fancy cuisine that is Hot Pockets than you realize.
Yeah, right.
The world is a Hot Pocket. And as we've talked about, every culture has meat in dough, and often meat with the sauce in dough as its thing. And then it's just about how well made it is. But you can I've definitely, especially with apps, you can talk yourself down the line of like, I enjoyed that. I am never paying for it again because it wasn't worth $14.99. That's 5 bags of pizza rolls.
Right. Yeah, we got pizza rolls at home. I can. It was really good, and the place was cool. It had like a little funky vibe to it. Had good cocktails. The other food we ate was good. It's all sort of like Asian influenced. I had a really good I had like a really good burger there too. But the best thing were these pizza dumplings, and then I was just like, yeah, they were excellent. But also, I can make those in my microwave at home.
Yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard because I mean, and we understand why, but it's like going out to eat, like it's just more expensive than it used to be. And I often think to myself, I better not be able to make this. Right? That it's either too difficult or too fancy or just labor intensive or I'm an idiot or whatever. And so that applies to like 97.3% of food in the world. I think to myself, I can't make this. So when you're the other 2.7%, you don't want to be in that zone.
Yeah.
All right. We promised it, and we have to give the people what we talk about. What is the deal with yogurt? Because I am trying to eat yogurt in the morning now, and I'm eating plain yogurt with granola and berries on it. My instinct is to put a whole bag of granola in with the yogurt, but that defeats the purpose. I kind of really have to talk myself through it. I understand that people eat yogurt, but as a man in his 50s who never has really done it, I'm trying, man. And like, is it going to be okay?
I think it's going to be okay. So I rarely eat it and don't ever make it for myself at home, but I do like a plain yogurt with some granola and like some blueberries and some honey in it. I think that's a nice treat.
Honey? Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweeten it up a little bit with some local honey. Plus they say the local honey is helps you with maybe like some seasonal allergies or cold or whatever, because so I would recommend sprinkling a little bit of that in there, maybe.
Okay. Maybe I'll try.
You can also just go buy. You know what they have? I don't know who makes them. They're called like flips, and There's a key lime pie one that I really like, where it's just like it's key lime flavored yogurt,
Oh,
and then there's a little cup that comes with it that's like a little bit of pie crust crumbles and
okay.
white chocolate chips, and you just dump them in there and mix it up, and it tastes like you're eating a key lime pie. It's pretty good.
Is it still healthy though?
I mean, it's
if not
healthier.
healthy,
It's healthier for you than eating a candy bar.
than a key lime pie. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I just like, so I just want everyone to know that I'm trying to eat yogurt, and it's not easy. It's not my instinct, but I think it's like,
why did you want to eat yogurt in the first place?
Why am I doing it? Because my body's falling apart. I don't know. I'm an old person. I just need to. But also, we were on a trip, and I had yogurt with granola and fruit on it at breakfast a couple times, and I was like, "This is actually pretty good. I should do this." And it opened my eyes to it. So we were like, "I'm growing up, Bill."
Yeah, I had it on an airplane one time. I had like a yogurt parfait on an airplane one time, and it was one of the better breakfasts I've had. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, the granola is super key, but it's like I just really have to prevent myself from putting 300 carbs worth of granola into the yogurt, which is not the point.
Good source.
Right, what are you thinking about?
As David says in the comments.
Yeah. I have to have breakfast protein besides bacon. That's the thing too.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I had 15 eggs this week. I need to find another source of protein when I'm eating breakfast.
Yeah. But I've had like my wife's grandfather was a farmer, and it's like he ate 4 eggs for breakfast every day. And it's like, yes. And then he went out and walked around his farm for 16 miles a day every day. He worked off the eggs. We sit in front of a microphone. We can't have 4 eggs a day.
I'm not working off the eggs, that's for sure. What am I thinking about? I'm not like a huge. I know like your daughter's like a big NBA fan, right? Like is like very in tune with what's going on with the NBA. The Luka Doncic trade is like the first time in a while that I can remember being like truly shocked by something that happened like transactionally in the sports world. So that's what I've been thinking about. Just like the way that sports are covered anymore, and like the transactional nature of sports are covered anymore. Hardly anything ever happens in secret. And you always get like a little like drips and drabs of something before it happens. And that blew my mind that happened and no one knew about it. And like it happened on Saturday night, right? Which was also the night of the Royal Rumble, which I wasn't able to watch live. So I was staying off my phone to avoid spoilers from the Royal Rumble. But then that news came down, and I felt like I had to get on Twitter to like make sure it was real. Like I thought like ESPN had gotten hacked, and like everybody was like just making up stories about Luka Doncic getting traded. So in like seeking out the information, I ended up spoiling the Royal Rumble for myself. But
sorry.
It's okay, it's fine, it's fake. But it's just entertaining. But just thinking like the way that went down really did kind of blow my mind, because it just seems like an impossibility anymore with the way that sports media is handled. It's something that important and seismic can be kept under wraps for as long as people said it was.
Yeah. It did make me think, as college football becomes more professionalized, that's the one thing that we're never going to get to in college sports, like a crazy trade
bombshell.
That is, and like I've always thought college sports is super interesting because there's so many layers to it, because it's in between high school and the pros. You can have interesting stuff about people joining college football. You can have interesting stuff with the draft about people leaving college football. I've thought the layers of like it being within universities can be really interesting and all that. A lot of that stuff, like some of the stuff that I used to think was interesting, now just like I zone out. And I think a lot of our audience does too, about like all the rules and regulations and lawsuits. Like, who cares? Just talk about the ball. There have been times previously where I thought like it was kind of getting inside some of that was kind of interesting. I think that's less so. So we're getting more like a professional sports league, but we can't have trades. Because I've done shows where we've done like fake trades and stuff where like that's kind of fun. But the idea of like, what if Ohio State traded Carnell Tate for an offensive tackle? There's sometimes, there's nothing like a good trade, right?
No,
like in sports, there's nothing like a good trade.
It's the best. Yeah, it's the best. Yeah.
So
what was the biggest trade you ever covered when you were doing covering pro sports? Do you remember? Did you cover the Scott Rowland trade?
I did cover the Scott Rowland trade. I also covered the Kurt Schilling trade because I was at the doctor that day, and like my doctor was like, "Oh, they're going to trade Shade Schilling." I was like, "No way!" And like he got traded like 11 minutes later. Professional sports writer here. There was when I was working in Northwest Indiana and covering some Chicago sports. There was a trade I think the White Sox made one time where they like gave up in the middle of the year and traded like half their team, and it was like a huge deal. And I got a speeding ticket on the way to the news conference because it was such a big deal, you know? So, yeah, like reshaping a roster out of nowhere is such a thing. And like I feel bad for Mavs fans. I was thinking about like imagine being an 8-year-old kid or an 11-year-old kid in Dallas, and Luka Doncic is your favorite player, and that happens out of nowhere. Like you're bawling your eyes out. That sucks.
Yeah.
So the idea that like, but now like, so we have the transfer portal aspect where a guy can leave, but it's not the exchange of assets, the exchange of players. You know, we have extra this, you have extra that. It'll help both teams. That is so interesting when it works. But yeah, that guy just like lost his mind.
Yeah, he sure did.
All right, this is what I'm thinking about. I went to the party store. So the party store near us is going out of business. And I actually thought to myself, party store is going out of business. I'm kind of into props. I should probably go look around. And I went, and the weapons were 75% off. So I got 2 Warhammers, and I mean this in the best sense of the word. You seem like a Warhammer guy to me.
Yeah, I like a Warhammer. Yeah, I like a Warhammer more than I like a sword.
So one of these is for you.
Oh wow,
these are foam. But also, we can walk around with these. So I got 2 Warhammers. I did get another sword. This is a little bit more like by the power of Grayskull kind of thing. It's not, but again, it's a sword that won't get me arrested. And then I guess this is a mace. Somebody was suggesting we could have like maybe Mace Mondays where it's like, who would I want to hit with my skull mace? But that also feels violent. But 75, these were all like $5 each, because they were 75% off. And I was just walking around like with all the weapons in my hands at the store, like, excuse me. It's like, I have a college football show. This is normal. So I was so happy.
How many did you want to buy, and how many were you told you could, like, what was the number before you were told you can only buy 4?
They had like 40 murder machetes covered in blood. And I was like, I kind of want to get 40 murder machetes, but I was like, that's not exactly our vibe. Like the dripping blood murder machete. That's not what we're about, right?
No, the blood's implied. We don't need it. We don't need it to be out there in the open. Yeah.
This is a pretty crazy skull. This was a little bit too far. It was $5. So, but this, there's a couple more Warhammers over there. I should have just bought all the Warhammers. So
maybe I'll take a ride over and get some Warhammers.
Yeah. So, but it makes me feel sad the party store's going out of business. They had a bunch of Halloween. I was definitely looking for Halloween costumes, like for other like kind of nighty kind of things, but there wasn't anything. So anyway, but I got a Warhammer waiting for you. Maybe I can trade it for the dragon statue.
I was gonna say I think get you the dragon statue back, so we can make that deal. Yeah.
So anyway, get ready for this, and then your son can play with this.
He'll love it actually, because he just likes to hit things with other things.
Yeah, great. All right, that's it for this version of Kings of the North. We'll be back on Monday with another show. We'll get to an ultimate Northern schedule. We still have some transfer portal stuff like roster building that we want to talk about. I do think now that all the schedules are out, I hope the sports books get to over-under totals for everybody. Like they're out there now for
they will eventually. Yeah,
half the teams, but not all of our teams. Once we have over-under win totals for all 28 of our Northern teams, we'll do a show talking about like what we like. We did that a year ago. I went back and watched that. We were really right about some stuff, and we were not quite as right about some other things, but I think that's always worthwhile. So we have a lot coming your way. Monday and Wednesday is the plan. There also might be some weeks. There'll definitely be at least one week where it's Tuesday, Thursday instead, as we have some moving parts. We have some travel. We have some personal stuff. So, but the goal, Bill, in the end, keep giving people 2 days a week of Kings of the North, right?
That is the plan. We also, we reminded in this, segment of Whatcha, we got to do an episode of trades again too. But I think we did the trades. I think we did the trades after spring ball, if I'm not mistaken, last year.
Okay.
So we'll have to wait for that.
Yeah. No, that'll be good. All right. Thanks as always to producer Mike for helping us with inbounds, out of bounds, and everything else he does to make this show work. Thanks to you guys as always for being here. like, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review. If you're on a podcast platform, I guess mostly Apple, and you can leave a review. Whatever you think. We always just appreciate the feedback, but mostly we appreciate you guys being here. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.